AngelRose Bed and Breakfast is a landmark around here. And this is the Brocht family home. The Brocht family it's a good German name. It's B-R-A-C-H-T, Brocht. It was a very large family, and they were very influential in Texas when Texas was still part of Mexico. The Brochts came here in the early 1800s. They spread out across Texas, and they were influential in bringing a lot of Germans to Texas. He was a very literate man. He spoke many languages. He was a mercantile. At some point, he left Texas and went into Mexico and had a very successful business in Mexico City. When the French conquered Mexico, he gathered up his family and rushed out of Mexico and came and settled here in Rockport. Eventually, they had 11 children, and 3 of them were his sons, Adolf, Roland, and Leopold. And Leopold and Roland decided to open a mercantile here in Rockport, and they were very successful at it. One of the remaining businesses in Rockport is the lumber yard, and up until a few years ago it was still called Brocht Lumber. So being fairly prosperous back in the late 1800s, Leopold married a young lady named Clara, and they bought a home that had been built about a mile south of here in a subdivision that was then called Oklahoma subdivision. And they lived there for a few years, and they decided that a mile was too far to be from his mercantile, because you had to go gather up the horses in the morning and feed them and hitch them to your wagon and drive into town. And eventually they just decided the easiest thing to do would be to move the house. So they cut the house in 2 or 3 pieces and brought it here by mule train and reassembled it on the lot. And we have a picture of it sitting on the lot after they put it back together. So they brought the house here by mule train and reassembled it on the lot. And he and Clara got busy making a family, and they had 7 children. And the tiny little house that they moved here from Oklahoma subdivision wasn't near large enough. So by 1900, the home had been extensively modified. It was a French Regency with a mansard roof, and they changed it to a Victorian, and they enlarged it to about 3,500 square feet from, probably half that. Fred was the oldest son, and he was a baseball player here. The 6 daughters that they had, several of them became school teachers. Most of the school teachers back then were spinsters. They were not allowed to marry. They didn't want to be paying for your husband's room and board, because I always paid for the teacher's room and board. So they thought it was inappropriate also. So we have pictures of one of the middle daughters standing in front of this mantelpiece, and this is a good representation of a German mantelpiece. It was probably imported. It's a zebra maple, and it is an original piece. We have a picture of one of the middle daughters, Lola, standing in front of this mantelpiece on her graduation day. Lola eventually married here in town, and we had her son over here a few months ago, and he brought some pictures and told some stories, and there are some original pieces in the house. The Brochts themselves stayed here for quite some time, but in 1919 there was a very bad hurricane, an unnamed hurricane that came through here and wiped out most of Corpus Christi and Rockport. Clara had decided they were going to stay. Their house was very substantial, and it was very tall. And so she put a lamp in one of the upper windows, and people gravitated here over the night of the storm. And the story goes that there were between 200 and 250 people in this house that night, and they were pulling them in from the 2nd floor balcony. That relates to about an 18 to a 20-foot storm surge. The house did survive. It would damage the house, but they fixed the house back up and continued to live here for a while. Eventually the home was sold to Judge Roy Hinton and his wife, and Judge Roy was kind of a colorful character. Wasn't always a judge, but he eventually became a deputy sheriff and then ran for a justice of the peace. And most people from my age know this as the Hinton House and not the Brocht House, because Judge Roy was a pretty vocal figure back then. They raised their kids here. When they were done with it, the house was in pretty bad shape. And in 1979, the Fishers bought the house, and Clewis and Marilyn Fisher moved here from Corpus Christi and had to start a ground-up restoration. And we found the house in 2008 when we came to stay here at the bed and breakfast. Marilyn and Cluis did a very good job of restoring the home. They opened it as a bed and breakfast after their children grew up and moved away. 5 years after they opened it, Cluis passed away, and Marilyn ran it until we bought it from her. The house is a good example of a Queen Anne Victorian. It has the cupola, the standard architectural piece that they look for in a Victorian. They also look for roof profiles, and this house fits that to the T. Big wraparound porches, steep angled roofs. House is now about 4,000 square feet. We have 3 rooms. The big master downstairs has a fireplace and a king-size bed. 2 rooms upstairs. We live in the 3rd room upstairs. And we see people from all over the world here. We have guests from South Africa, from Great Britain, from France. Not too long ago, we had a French couple who came at Thanksgiving and asked if we would prepare them a traditional American Thanksgiving dinner. And we generally don't serve lunch, and especially on Thanksgiving. But they asked, and we provided them with, the traditional American turkey and the cornbread stuffing and the green bean casseroles, and they were great fun. And they came back a few months ago, about a year later, and stayed with us again and brought a different French couple with him that time. So we have a lot of repeat customers. Most of the big events in Rockport that are put on by the Chamber of Commerce, we're booked in advance, usually a year in advance. Folks will come and stay with us for the Hummingbird Festival or for the Oyster Fest or for Sea Fair. When they leave, they'll make a reservation for the next year. We have a lot of loyal customers. We came here to stay at a bed and breakfast, and we decided to buy. We were looking for some income-producing property, and we didn't like what we saw here. And so we decided that we could live here in this beautiful old place, and I love to cook. So it's been a really good match for us, and we really enjoy the people that come through here. Not everybody wants to stay at a bed and breakfast, but those that do like the experience here a lot, and they tell us that. A lot of people think that we're something because we bought the place, but we're not. We're just regular folks that enjoy cooking a good breakfast. We do host parties here, and we've had house concerts here and receptions here. Probably the most fun are the weddings. We've had a lot of honeymooners come and stay here. Rockport is kind of a kind of a wedding destination. And a lot of people will go have a wedding on a beach or a wedding in one of the pavilions, and they'll stay here on their honeymoon, or they'll put the family in here. Next weekend, some of our good friends here in Rockport, one couple is getting married, and all their friends are staying here at the bed and breakfast. They're having the wedding at one of the convention centers, but they're staying here. So the Brocht House is located very close to the old Brocht Mercantile. The old Brocht Mercantile is on Austin Street, and it was one of the buildings that it was almost submerged during the hurricane. But Austin Street is the main street in Rockport that has all the shops and the art galleries and several of the major restaurants. One of the best restaurants in Rockport is on Austin Street. It's 2 blocks to Austin Street. When you cross Austin Street, you're in Rockport Marina. And inside Rockport Marina is the Women's Club, the Chamber of Commerce, the Texas Maritime Museum, the Center for the Arts, the Aquarium, the Bay Education Center with Science on the Sphere exhibit, and also the Beach Park and the Fairgrounds. Sea Fair is on the Fairgrounds. The Wine and Foods Festival is on the Fairgrounds. The new Bay Education Center is it's a new facility they just built here, and it has one of 60 Science on the Sphere exhibits in the world. Our beach park is Texas's first and only blue wave beach, and that's a designation for a very feature-rich beach and a very family-friendly beach. No pets allowed on the beach for obvious reasons. They groom the beach once a day. They have thatch roof umbrellas up and down the beach for you to use. They have covered picnic tables with barbecue pits. They have playground equipment. They have 2 pavilions on the beach, large pavilions with lots of shade and restrooms and big barbecue pits. Water is very shallow for young children. It's just a very nice beach park to be on. Rockport is also very close to the Aransas National Wildlife Refuge. Aransas National Wildlife Refuge is 175,000 acres of pristine wildlife refuge, primarily dedicated to birds, but there are deer and javelina and feral hogs and all kinds of stuff. But the whooping cranes, they spend winter here, so they migrate here and spend winter in Rockport. So the 260 to 280 whooping cranes can be found two places. One is in Canada and one is in Rockport. If you want to see the whooping cranes, this is the place to go. And we get a lot of birders who come here just to see the whooping cranes. Rockport also has a hummingbird festival, and it's been going on for quite some time. I think it's the 17th year for the Hummingbird Festival. The hummingbirds flock through Rockport. There will be hundreds and hundreds of hummingbirds. If you have 5 or 6 feeders, it'll be just thick with hummingbirds here. And then a month or two later, they all leave and migrate down to Central or South America. Rockport is known for its birding. There are over 300 species of birds that you can find here in the Rockport area. If you have a list, if you have your check-off list, you can come to Rockport and check off at least 300 of them. The fishing is one of the great things about Rockport too. Rockport has very, very shallow bays. Rockport is a peninsula that comes up between two bays, and the average depth is about 7 feet. So the red fishing is wonderful here, and so are the speckled trout. I've been told there's about 300 professional guides between here and Corpus Christi that fish these bays. And all you have to do is read the local Rockport Pilot on Saturdays to see they catch a bunch of fish down here. The redfish is a big sporting fish, and since the bays are so shallow, they'll put you in a couple of feet of water and you'll see their tails sticking out of the water as they chase crabs up, and the fishing is very good here. There's also a lot of duck hunting here too. Because the bays are shallow, we get lots of natural habitat for ducks. Most of the guides double as duck hunting guides during duck season, and they have airboats, and they'll go out and put you in blinds and let you clean up on the ducks. You can go offshore and fish, but all the offshore goes out through Port Aransas. There are several professional birding boats that come in here during the whooping crane season. They will take you to the Rookery Islands, where you can see not only the whooping cranes, but the roseated spoonbills and the oyster catchers and almost anything that you want to see that's a coastal bird. Let me say something about the art community. Back in the 50s, Rockport was just a sleepy little fishing town. There was some artists that moved here. Eventually, those artists brought other artists. And today there's 60 or 70 art galleries and art studios here in Rockport, where, well, for instance, we have a bait shack in Rockport Harbor that's probably, arguably, the most painted bait shack in the world. It's Fleming's. There's one right next to it called Mom's, and they're institutions. They've been here since the 40s. We have several big events that are geared towards the art community. We have a new film festival that's been in existence for, I think, 5 or 6 years now. We have the Wine and Foods Festival. There are multiple art galleries around here that display some of the most beautiful art. Some of it is sculpture, some of it is painting, some of it is photography. Jesus Morales is from Rockport, and Jesus received the highest civilian art award that you could from George Bush. Jesus has pieces that start about $10,000 to $20,000 for a small piece, but several of his pieces of art are here at the Center for the Arts. We have a sculpture garden, and some of the more prominent artists have some of their larger pieces out there. It's a beautiful place to visit. We have local artists who are featured in 2 of the rooms in the Center for the Arts, and then on a monthly basis we have a rotating art exhibit and an art show in the Center for the Arts, and we'll bring in artists from other parts of of the United States or other parts of the world. The art community and the art industry is very big down here.